Good morning again, Niels.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Niels. I'm the director of the Danish Center for Arts and Interculture based in Copenhagen, in Denmark. And we are a private organization, you could say. We used to be a public body working in the intersection between the formation of policy, cultural policy, the relationship between arts and cultural institutions and their constituency, citizens, their audience, their users, their visitors. And we commission quite a lot of research. And my role here is to be the facilitator of the day, and I will do my best to speak slowly, make sure that you all have a chance to understand what I'm saying, or at least, hopefully, that Zoom Translate can understand what I'm saying, so that you can read it in good and proper Romanian. It's such a privilege to be invited to facilitate a short session like this one with peers and professionals who are engaged with public art in public spaces, art in public spheres, and what that really means, how that affects us, what that articulates in terms of where we are as cultures, as nations, as professionals, as structures in our respective societies. And in the Nordic Insights, we have this Romanian, Moldovan dialogue with Nordic colleagues, with Nordic partners, with colleagues and partners from Denmark, Norway, Finland, us up here in the dark, cold north. And today we have two speakers with us that will give us their perspective on what is public art, what are we talking about when we are referring to pieces of art that we will meet in public spaces. That can be urban spaces, parks, plazas, different kinds of outdoor facilities where we meet art, where art will suddenly be there, and it will in a way start a dance of dialogue with us, where we will engage or disengage, where we will be provoked or engaged in different ways or stimulated, where we will to some extent relate to it, and we will navigate around it, and it will be there as something for us to deal with. Intellectually, socially, it will affect us. It will also be very often a piece of work that will, in a way, become one of many different elements that will define that specific context that we navigate in, whether that is a public space or an urban city or a rural area. That is what happens. And I think we have the privilege of having a researcher that will be our first voice today, Sergiu Musteață. And we will have another researcher and curator from a public curatorial platform, actually initiated by the Swedish state, Alba Baeza, with us today. And I will allow both Sergiu and Alba, I hope you will do that, to take a few minutes just to introduce yourselves and the role of the institutions that you represent today. The name of the game, you could say, is that you're more than welcome to contribute by asking questions. You can do that in the chat, and I'm pretty sure Juana will help us translate them so I can understand them as well. And then we can constantly have this floating dialogue throughout this morning. Sergiu will start with a 20-25 minute presentation, and then we will have a Q&A to Sergiu, and that is because we know that Sergiu has to run before the very end of this morning. So just to make sure that you have a chance to raise questions directly to Sergiu before we hand over the screen to Alba. So with no further ado from my side, I would very much like to welcome you, Alba and Sergiu. And Sergiu, please, the screen is all yours.
So, dear colleagues and friends, thank you so much for inviting me and insisting to participate in your project and your debates. It's a great honor to me to share our experience and my experience on this. First of all, when we would like to discuss about the situation in Moldova, and related to the public monuments, related to different debates on our past and how the Soviet legacy influenced the nowadays life in Moldova, including when we are talking about the monuments, especially the Soviet monuments, which still exist on the main squares and the main public areas in Chișinău. During the last already over 3 decades of our independence, of course, we have new monuments, we have the new approaches, we have the new initiatives, some of them quite successfully, some of them not so much, because always it is related to the past. So, because Niels asked me, so my name is Sergiu Musteață, I'm professor at the history department of the Pedagogical State University in Chișinău. My degree is history, but I started and my PhD and habilitation was in archaeology. So actually by background, I'm archaeologist, but of course we are dealing with the monuments, we are dealing with different public spaces. And because of Moldova, it's a special case, of course, we are dealing with the contemporary history too. So how it is related to the memory, the policy, and of course the building the new vision of development of the state, and including how to deal with the past and especially the Soviet past. So I will try to move to my presentation, and let me know if it's visible and it is okay. So
it is visible, but if you activate the share presentation down to the right, further down in your presentation, then we will see the whole screen. Right now, we see your whole presentation.
Second, yeah. So, of course, when we speaking about Moldova, we have to take into account that nowadays independent state Republic of Moldova, it's a successor of the Soviet Republic, which was done by Soviets in 1940 by occupation of Bessarabia, and as a result of Hitler-Stalin Pact signed in 1939, and then in June 1940, Soviet army occupied Baltic countries, including part of Romania, Bessarabia, Bukovina, and Herzegovina area. So immediately they organized the Soviet republics, and I will not speak about the Soviet history and how it was, because it's a lot of things to say. But anyway, during the Gorbachev perestroika and opening the opportunities to meet each other, to talk about the history, about the languages, first of all, immediately after that started the national movement, emancipation, and everything was around the language. The right to receive, the right to speak, to write, and to turn back to the Latin alphabet, because the Soviets changed the alphabet during the 40s to the Cyrillic one, just to demonstrate that it's another language, it's another identity. That's why until today the identity issue is very sensitive in Republic of Moldova. When you say that you are Romanian, like you are against Moldovan statehood, and you are against Moldovans who are considering themselves as own nation or local nation. The Soviets try to build and to argue from the academic point of view the creation of the Moldovan nation, which is different than the Romanian one, and that's why nowadays it's still under discussion, this huge topic. But you could see the picture from 1989. At that time, I became a history student at the history department, and I participated in some pictures. I have seen myself in these public activities. But you could see the Gorbachev in the Soviet style was treated like a Jesus, so the savior of Moldovans, that gave the opportunity to meet people, to talk about, and also you could see close to the Gorbachev portrait the map of Bessarabia, which was divided and occupied by the Soviets. So this issue is still actual, and of course the situation in this perestroika years was quite difficult, because Moldovan leaders didn't accept to sign the Union Treaty, and that's why they provoked the separatist movement in Moldova. In August 1990, it was proclaimed another Soviet Republic, Gagauzian one. It's very interesting. And then in September, Transnistria Republic. So you know about. Still today, the issues about the separatists are active. Gagauzian, more or less, it's solved. It's autonomy, but it's dominated by the Russian propaganda. but Transnistrian separatism is still active. We have so-called frozen conflict, but its situation is quite difficult. So that's why at the end of Soviet Union, as a result of the putsch, the parade of the Declaration of Independence started, including Moldova declared the independence on August 27. But a few days before, the Moldovan parliament, more or less independent at that time, declared the Communist Party out of law and, of course, tried to take some decisions concerning the communists. They prohibited the Communist Party on the territory of Moldova, and also it was a decision concerning the Soviet ideology, monuments, and symbols. It's quite interesting decision when 2 days before the Declaration of Independence regarding the liquidation of monuments and other attributes of the communist ideology. So yeah, it's quite debatable question about the liquidation, why they decided to liquidate. Actually, nothing happened so much. It was just the Lenin monument of the main square in Chișinău moved to another part of the city, and in some villages, cities around the Republic, they have been moved, or in some villages they destroyed the Lenin monument or this public, let's say, symbol in the community. But deadline, you could see they approved 25th of August, and deadline to solve this huge problem, huge Soviet legacy, it was September 1st. So actually, in 10 days, they intend to raise the Soviet legacy and the Soviet monuments and symbols on territory of Moldova, which is actually impossible. But the attitude and approach, I think it was wrong one, to liquidate it, not solving the question. Probably it was much better to move them to the museum area and to move them to the archives, but not to liquidate, because the problem is in the mind of the people, not just in the main squares. That's why society reacted, let's say, negatively mostly. The issue of the communism in Moldovan society remained to be actual, and still today. We have Communist Party, we have Socialist Party, which are following the Soviet and communist ideology. Even if it was out of law in 1991, few years later, the parliament changed the mind and they actually accepted to register the new party of the communists in Moldova, which from the statute, from the first article, it's mentioned that they are following the previous party, so the previous ideology and the Communist Party of Moldova. So society reacted variously. In 2001, when the communists succeed to obtain the majority in the parliament and to create the government and also to elect the president, part of society reacted and tried to down communists, and we would like to be a free zone of communism, but they didn't succeed so much, because during the next 8 years, actually communists controlled the country, and just in 2009, they won the elections, but they couldn't elect the president. That's slowly the situation was changed. But during the communist regime, they related to the monuments, they started the process to rehabilitate in some villages, in some cities, actually have been resettled the monument of Lenin. In some new one, in some cities, actually they replaced and moved them back to the main square of the cities, and also try to placed in the National Register of Protection of the public monuments, some monuments from Chișinău, which are quite representative. Grigore Kotovsky as a Soviet leader from Transnistria, but very much, okay, he was born on territory of Bessarabia, but he was politically involved in 1920s as part of this autonomous Soviet Republic of Moldavia, as part of Ukraine. And then also Sergei Lazo, another Bolshevik leader, or Komsomol heroes from one of the main square in Chișinău, or also it's another liberation from the fascist occupation monument, which still exists in Chișinău. So they tried to place them in the register, but the opposition reacted quite powerful, and they stopped the process. But after that, they approved the new law, and at the moment we have such monuments in Chișinău. And more or less, protected by the law and by the legal frame. So you could see the monuments. Lenin was replaced from the main square to the exhibition area, and then you could see Kotovsky and Sergei Lazo. Sergei Lazo is one of the highest public monument in Chișinău, placed to the Botanica area of Chișinău. But also during this period of time, it was a huge debate in mass media, and a case just in 2011, a guy not so far from Chișinău in Meren, actually it's 25 or 30 kilometers from the capital, he bring the monument of Lenin from the main square of his village and placed in his garden. And one journalist asked him why. He said, the leader of proletariat has to leave, and I will leave the monument to my kids as a legacy. I'm not sure if the kids of this guy are well informed who was Lenin and how he is important for Moldovan society, but you could see quite young at that time, 35 up to 40, but still believing in Lenin and considering the Lenin important for Moldovan society. So during this period of time, we have these two movements or two approaches of Lenin. Some place the Lenin head on the cars, others try to destroy, others to rehabilitate. And in 2010, at that time, the interim president, Mihai Gimbu, established the Truth Commission in Moldova for the first time. As an example, it was the Romanian Commission, but not just Romanian, also the post-Soviet, post-socialist countries. As an example, I was one of the deputy chair of the commission, and we tried to have different meetings, including with the communist leaders. You could see I'm close to the Voronin and trying to discuss, but they considered that it's a dangerous issue, and they said one part of society cannot condemn another part of society. Actually, the commission was not about condemning. It was to study, to research, and to present the facts of the Soviet policy, terror, and deportation on territory of Moldova, issues which was not treated, actually prohibited during the Soviet time. But the reaction was quite negatively. And also we invited experts around Europe, around the world, to share the experience of Truth Commission, including how to deal, what to do with the public monuments from the Soviet time. But next day of the conference, in front of the conference hall, we have seen representatives of the Communist Party, and actually they have some papers of the inscription. If we are talking about anti-communism, it's meaning fascism. And also you could see the pictures of the leaders at that time comparing with the Hitler, of the Nazi regime, and so on. So it's a sensitive issue when we're talking about the past. For example, in the same year, the same president, the interim president, signed a decree to declare the June 28th day of occupation. So the Communist Party condemned the decree and attacked it to the Constitutional Court. And Constitutional Court mentioned that it is anti-constitutional, and they actually canceled the decree. Even if in another law or different other decision of the government before, it was already mentioned that in June 28, 1940, the Soviet Army or Red Army occupied Bessarabia. And also another part of society reacted quite strange on this decree, including the deputies from Russia settled to Chișinău, trying to convince us to not treat in such way because it's not correctly. Also, in the place of the Lenin was in the main square of Chișinău, it was an initiative of Liberal Party to build a monument of memory of the Soviet terror and victims. And leaders of different organizations, parties, including Bashkan of Gagauzia at that time, reacted negatively, and they mentioned this is the blame initiative, and they have to stop this initiative, and they will destroy this stone because it's not representing the Moldovan past and history. Related to the monuments of the Second World War, during the communist administration, 2001, 2008, it was a huge project to rehabilitate different monuments and memorials related to the Second World War. In Chișinău, they invested a lot to reanimate the so-called memory area. Now it's called Eternity, but anyway, they invested a lot of millions of lei to rehabilitate the monument. This is a monument, a Soviet tank, and a small memorial close to the border of Moldova and Romania. And also it was habilitated during the Soviet. In some villages, you could see another situation of the Soviet soldiers related to the Second World War, actually destroyed, and the people are considered that it's not important for Moldovan history. Related to the name of May, also it's a huge debate in Moldova society. Until 2 years ago, it was celebrated, still celebrating the name of May as Victory Day, very much supported by the Russian propaganda of the Russian symbols and so on. But it was a reaction of another part of society. I don't need your symbols. We have our symbols. And 9th of May, it's a day of Europe, and we have to commemorate the victim of the Second World War, not to celebrate the victory. It's a difficult. Still, this year, the Socialist Party organized a march to celebrate the victory, like the Russians are doing. 2 years ago, the pro-European parliament voted, actually prohibited the symbols of the war, of the Russia, and nowadays, more or less, let's say, it's not legally to have such symbols in the public space. But it's, I think it's about the value, about the symbols in Moldovan society. I selected the Moldovan currency, which is national one, it's independent one. It was approved in 1993. Officially, we have the Moldovan lei by the name like in Romania, but different design. And I tried to compare the Soviet ruble and the Moldovan lei. And you could see the left part, it's Moldovan lei, the right is Soviet money. You could see the size, the colors, the design in general. It's the Soviet one. The author just changed the head of Lenin with the head of Stefan the Great, and of course it's written in the Latin alphabet in the Romanian language. So you could see we are somewhere between of the old and the new realities. Concerning the statehood, also Moldovan society is still remaining divided. Part of society considered that homeland is Moldova. Another part of society still living in Soviet Union, and you could see some different surveys. In 2018, for example, 7 years ago, but last year it was done another one, and situation a little bit changed, but not so much. You could see half of society actually regretting dissolution of Soviet Union, and 1/3 or a little bit more of society still considering the Soviet Union the best one, and if they will have a chance to vote for re-establishing the Soviet Union, they will do. So that's why they consider Naša Rodina SSSR still today. So, and another example, in 2012, when the communist leaders and party organized different protests in Chișinău against Democrats and pro-European parties, you could see the different flags, the Soviet one, and also some written pancards of the Moldova это русская земля. Moldova, it's Russian land. Exactly the same way it was used in Ukraine when they tried to fight against pro-European movements in Ukraine, in Kiev. They're saying Ukraine is Russian land. That's why in 2014 they attacked Ukraine, occupied Crimea, and opened 2 new separatist regions in the east, Lugansk and Donetsk. And the second phase, it's quite terrible one what is happening on territory of Ukraine. So just 1 year ago, in the north of Republic of Moldova, in a village, you could see strange monument of Lenin in the main square of the village. During the night, I don't know who exactly, nobody knows. Actually, the police couldn't establish who did, but they crashed the head of Lenin like a protest against having the monument of Lenin in the main square of the village. But the administration, the local administration, decided to reestablish. And in 3 months, they actually have a new Lenin in the main square of Chișinău, of Bretușeni in Edinets Rayon in the north of Republic of Moldova. So probably, and I have 2 more slides and I'll finish, probably situation slowly will change during the next years if we will maintain the pro-European and integration movement in Moldova, because decommunization didn't happen clearly in the Soviet, in the Moldovan society. So the referendum of last year, you could see a little bit more than 50% of the society voted in favor of European Union developments and to include this strategic approach in Moldovan constitution. But you could see the political map of the voters. Red one, it's meaning anti-European, so European skepticism, actually in favor of the being close to the Russia. I think the situation representing very specific, the same issue you could see election of the president last year. So also just the main, the center of the Republic of Moldova are supporting pro-European president Maia Sandu, and you could see majority supporting another one. So it was also very little, or a little bit more than half of society, and we succeed to elect the pro-European president. This year election, the situation changed a lot, which is meaning, I think, more optimism in our pro-European view of development. You could see the map, it's more yellow than red. So the huge majority of inhabitants, of voters, consider that the way of development is European one. Probably last year elections and this year they influence somehow, and we have the majority. So pro-European party majority just a few weeks ago voted. So we hope that this development will help us, and also we will. So you could see the evolution of the political map between 2024 and 2025. And we hope this will influence the politics of memory in Moldovan society, because in 2025, for the first time, the government has approved the national program for memory. They agreed to pay some activities, Congress of Memory, and also some public activities around different issues concerning the memory of Moldovan society related to the Soviet past, and how to deal with the public spaces, with the public monuments. So we hope this program will enlarge and diversify the activities during the next year, and probably slowly we'll try to be more open-minded and more critique related to the Soviet past, and we'll try to have more let's say contemporary monuments related to different issues. If you come to Chișinău, you'll see a lot of other monuments appear in the public spaces related to different social culture issues, but the political monuments still dominating the public space in Moldovan society, and most of them are related to the Soviet past. That's why this is also about the elections, how the situation developed during the last 15 years. So from the red to the yellow, let's hope that anyway, Moldovan society, it's still divided from various issues, and especially identity and the culture and the heritage are part of these sensitive issues of the problems of Moldova. Separatism still existing, and economical problems too. But European way of development, I think it's a way to solve a lot of problems and to try to build a real democratic society, and to have a tolerant approach to various sensitive issues of the past, including the monuments. So thank you so much for your attention, and I will be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you very, very much, Sergiu. Super interesting. It raises a lot of questions in my head, at least. One of them is, obviously, when you're talking about a struggle of symbols, and you said here in the very last part of your presentation that it is still predominantly political figures, political people that are overrepresented in the monument. The monuments are reflective of a specific process, especially the Soviet period. I'm just reflecting out there for instance, in that little village in the north of Moldova. How is the decision to place another Lenin statue in the central square? How is that commissioned? Is that part of a very, very deliberate political only process, or does it in any way include local constituency, voters, citizens? Is it a top-down approach to how we design our public spaces, or is there a kind of reflectory, more or less visible dialogue going on?
Very good questions. Thank you so much, Niels. Mostly, if we are speaking of local public administration, they have the local council, and they are deciding how to deal, what to do. And this special case in the north, it's not a unique one. We have around the country, and we have Transnistria. Actually, it's another world. But majority in this village are actually of the Ukrainian backgrounds, but very much Russified. And still today, they have, you see, they support Soviet vision and Soviet approach. Another part of this village, close to the church, they have portraits of the Soviet general from the Second World War. So Zhukov and another, and it was 2 years ago, not conflict, but huge debates, and some journalists came from Chișinău to try to do an interview, and the locals reacted very aggressively. Why? They received it like they intend to bring them from the war back, and then no, they save us in the Second World War. We have to protect them. They are our savers. So it's really Russian propaganda effects. Because I could give you an example. In 2009, actually, I was director of the Institute of History in 2010, but I don't know why Academy of Science sent me to Moscow in 2009 to the meeting of the director of the Institute of History from the, let's say, former Soviet republics, excepting Baltic states. So I was among other director of history institutes from Asia, from Caucasus, including from Ukraine at the time in 2009. And they invited us actually to train how to prepare the countries for the anniversary 2010 of the Victory Day. And it was a very strange approach. They returned back to the Soviet approach. So the patriotic war and victory, the role of victory in our life. My reaction was why we are still using the Soviet world approach. Why we're not saying about the Second World War, about the memory, about commemoration. And the director of the Institute of History from Russia said, we have the decree of our president, and we have to follow the content of the decree. I said, okay, it's you. At that time, it was not Putin. Putin was prime minister. And I said, it's your president, it's not mine. So we have our president, and we have another view of future development. And he became red and said, no, we have the rules and we have to follow. After that, they never invited me to Moscow. So you could see how they tried to not celebrate anniversary and do the parade in Moscow, but to enlarge this approach to all other already independent countries, but being part of this Soviet frame, and to say exactly what we have to do, how to deal with this. That's why nowadays audiovisual council, it's a little bit better monitoring, but before it was dominating by the Russian broadcast, TV, radio, newspapers, and everything which was in Russia was exactly in Moldova. That's why people are thinking that what is saying the Russian guys or Russian president, they have to do in Moldova. That's probably why people are reacting in a such way. And the local council, it's voting. If they are majority, they will vote to place, including Stalin, probably, even if officially it's prohibited. But you could see in Russia how many cities and local administration decided to place the monument of Stalin in the main squares. In Moldova, not, but probably if some people will follow, or if the administration didn't stop this Russian propaganda involvement or so much dominating the Russian propaganda, probably we could have the same like in Russia.
I think it's super interesting. I mean, to me, that sounds like quite a, how shall I put it? When you have the position of enforcing propaganda, enforcing a specific narrative on people, you do it because you can then dominate the public discourse. You can dominate the political debate. You can dominate the you could so call it the social design by placing a tank as a monument in a city and say, well, that has to be there because we are celebrating liberation. You can celebrate liberation in many ways, and you can humanize liberation. So placing a tank is more than just a liberation symbol. It's also a manifestation of power. Exactly. That is immediately put as a manifestation that we came once, we can come again. So it's what I'm trying to say is the reading of that symbol is always in the mind of those seeing it. Yeah. And of course, for those who tap into a predominantly Soviet or Russian narrative, they accept the narrative to some extent. And for those who see it as oppression or a symbol of oppression or alienation, they will read it as such. And that leads to my question. Because one of the things that, and you can comment as well, Alba, if you like, one of the things that we are having up here in the north at the moment is how public art is becoming more and more a result of a social process, including local citizens, including local communities, including local notions on social design or spatial design or urban design, and the role of the public art being interactive or non-interactive, being didactic or symbolic or reflective a specific notion of whatever that might be that is in that construct of the artwork itself. And I think that's interesting. Could you imagine, or do you have examples from Moldova where social interaction has been part of designing the frame and the formation and even the curation of the artworks in public spaces?
I think nowadays, slowly, we are improving the legal framework. First of all, how to organize the public spaces, how to or better preserve the historic areas. So from this perspective, including we have since a couple of years, we have the law dedicated to the public monuments. We have the National Register of the Public Monuments, because we have the monuments, historic monuments, it's another law, another register, but exactly concerning the public monuments, the public squares, including parks and memorials. So slowly we're developing the legal framework, which is very important when we are discussing about the presenting to the public, how to involve this social approach, how to use such spaces in a better way, in a democratic way, in more peaceful way, and to try to train society that it's not so important to celebrate the victory, because victory means victims. Victory means a lot of things, not just this too political approach. We have to talk about more tolerant approach. That's why I think slowly we are going in this way. But it's not so easy. Education and the public history, it's a long and difficult process, because the history education in Moldova also is very sensitive. What to teach, how to teach, and also, first of all, how to call the national history.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very, very good. That's a very interesting and good answer. I think it's always interesting when you look at Europe, for instance, that there are so many different narratives. And of course, even in our cities, that goes for Alba in Stockholm and for me in Copenhagen, when we come to a central square somewhere, it's probably a king on a horse that is the public statue, the public symbol, the monument. But what is interesting right now is, for instance, in Copenhagen, we have had a campaign that we need to get more women into the public sphere, being reflected, more statues of women who has made a societal difference. So the gender equality perspective is now actually setting a debate about underrepresented groups in society, women mostly, but even other underrepresented groups not being visible in the formation of public art, for instance. And I think that's an interesting, that too is an interesting dimension, because it helps reflect the multi-layered dimensions of a living democracy. That it's not just a power struggle; it's also an identifier in many ways, and identification comes in many forms. So that notion of it is quite interesting. Wano, is that a question you would like to raise? Could you just My Romanian is so bad.
I'm translating now. I was just mentioning a book that Sergiu Musteață wrote. Is about the history manual. So the history books for children in school, in schools for our colleagues. But I'm translating it now so that you can see.
No, it is an English version. So the first it was published in English. So we and our neighbors, what we are.
I will look it up and give it. Yeah, sure.
Can I raise a hand?
Yes, please.
Please, Cezar. Hi.
Hi, Niels. Hi,
Cezar.
Juana,
Nice to see
dear
you.
Professor Musteață.
Cezar, nice to see you.
I'm very happy to see you. I have one short intervention about your topic. It's because I was in this year to Chișinău, and on the way to Chișinău, I saw a very important memorialistic outdoor museum like Memento Park in Budapest with the monument from communist area, many Lenins. And what I want to mention is that we don't have it in Romania. Bucharest don't have this kind of memorial park, but in Ialoveni there are two kind of museum, private. It's a private museum. This one in the park, and another one with the history of communism, with piece of small pieces of memorial part of the communist time. This is what I wanted to mention.
It's the same owner, Mr. Costin, and he has a huge collection of various issues, including the communist symbols. And this private park, not so far from between Chișinău and Romanian border. So yeah, it's done not just in Hungarian style, probably more in the Baltic approach.
No, there are also in Moscow. It was an example. It was even in Bulgaria, in Sofia, in the Ministry of Culture, they have this kind of. They put it all together, but in Romania, it's not this kind of memorial. That was I want to mention it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cesar, for that intervention. That's enormously useful. I will recommend all of you to, if you want to, you can raise questions. You can also digest a bit and raise your questions to Sergiu a bit later on. You can also use the hand symbol. It's in the bar under where it says reactions. There you can find the hand symbol if you want to raise the hand and just ask your question. And of course, you can articulate your questions in Romania and in Romanian, and I will have the support of both Sergiu and Juana to help me translate. So, I thank you very much, Sergiu, for a fantastic presentation and for answering my questions. Very, very helpful, and it gives a good dimension of the elasticity that we are talking about when we are talking about public art and public spaces, art in public spaces. So now I will very much like to raise your awareness towards Alba. Alba is sitting in Stockholm, in Sweden, and is a researcher and not least a curator on art in public spheres, and also one of those who are commissioning art in public spheres and knows a lot about the commissioning process in the Nordics. So Alba, please give some further introduction to yourself, your job, the very specific role of Statens Konstråd in Sweden, and take it away. The screen is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Niels. And let me start by thanking Sergiu also for a very inspiring presentation. It will be made apparent to our audience today that we are talking about two very different cases. Sweden, of course, has a very different historical background, and in a way that reflects also where we are at with public art debates and commissions today. But I'll start with introducing myself. Alba Baeza is my name. I have been a member, I'm a curator and a writer and a researcher. I have been a member of the curatorial team at Statens Konstråd, or Public Art Agency Sweden, since 10 years ago, more or less. And a brief note on Public Art Agency Sweden. We are a governmental agency that was founded in 1937. So we are soon approaching our 90th anniversary. And it's an independent agency, but fully funded, so dependent on the Ministry of Culture, of the Department of Culture of the Swedish government. And since it was established, the role of the agency is to bring art, to commission art in public spaces and to bring it closer to a variety of citizens and locations around the country of Sweden. And today, of course, the task and the way in which this art has been commissioned throughout the 90 years of existence of the organization has changed a lot. But nowadays, the focus of the agency is multi-dimensional. On the one hand, for instance, I have a team of colleagues that buy existing artworks and place it in different public buildings throughout the country and also internationally, also in embassies, for instance. So the agency takes care of the art collections, let's say, that are featured in most public buildings. And on another side of the team, the part where I'm working, we are a team of curators commissioning new site-specific artworks. Both permanent, so-called permanent, and temporary interventions as well. We also work with urban development projects and with this more sort of mediation dimension or knowledge development aspect of public art. So we organize seminars, discussions, publications, and the idea is a bit to spread knowledge about public art. And you will see, I will present 2 case studies today, because in Sweden, in the Nordics in general, but in Sweden specifically, public art is commissioned through a variety of methods also, and there are many stakeholders. I work for the Public Art Agency, which is the state-run organization, but then we have regional organizations, we have municipal organizations in each city that also commission public artworks. And I think it's really interesting to look at how there are similarities, of course, in the commissioning process, but there are also differences. Today I will present 2 cases. One of them is a project commissioned by Public Art Agency. It's Jan Vo's artwork titled Tongue and Groove, which was, the commission started in 2016, and it will be inaugurated next year in 2026. And the second project is the anti-racist monument in Malmö, which is the way it came into being is a bit the opposite. It's a good comparison, I think, because it is the product of a civil initiative, of a grassroots movement that claimed for the need of an anti-racist monument in Malmö to address a series of complex events that had taken place and that I would introduce later on. Let me start by sharing my presentation, and then we can support the discussion with some images. I hope you see my screen now.
Yes.
Yes. Good. So, Tongue and Groove by Jan Vo, as I said, is one of the longest commissions we have been working in. I've been a part of the team, of the curatorial team since almost the beginning, the year after it was commissioned. And it is an overall artistic intervention in the central station of Gothenburg, commissioned both by Public Art Agency Sweden and the Swedish Transport Administration. And the project was selected via an international competition in 2016, and as I said, will be inaugurated next year, hopefully. And the curatorial vision for the competition and for all this series of infrastructure interventions was titled Chronotopia, and it extended an invitation for artists to relate to the city's different layers of history, deployed both in time and space. Excuse me. And the idea was to integrate art in an early stage in all the commissioning processes. Excuse me. So the new central station, I'll start by saying, is part of a broader project called Västlänken which consists on 3 new stations and a very sort of resource craving infrastructure project in the whole of the city of Gothenburg. It's a new railway going under the city, and the agency has been involved in the overall artistic vision for it. Jan Vo, as you probably know, is a very well-known artist internationally today. He has a background, a migrant background, because he is born in Vietnam but moved to Denmark with his family at a very early age. So he's a Danish based artist, and belonging, migration, and these often complex relations between the East and the West are often at the core of his artistic practice. A very interesting aspect of his practice also is that he weaves together personal and collective experiences with socio-political issues or frameworks where these experiences develop. His work comprises different formats, and he's worked with installation, with sculpture, with photography, with found objects that he acquires through antiquaries or similar sources. And what he often does in a more, let's say, classical exhibition framework is to arrange these materials, proposing a critical way of looking at cultural heritage, and also a critical way to deconstruct dominant narrations of history. So in this concrete project, Jan's proposal was to actually focus on one of the aspects of Gothenburg's cultural heritage and its historical connection with the Swedish East India Company, which was a trading company dedicated to trading with India and China, similar to many other European colonial entities from the 18th century. And what Tongue and Groove does, what the artistic proposal does, is to propose an integral intervention in the architecture and the design of the station by focusing on the choice of materials and the design of furniture and several furnishing details, such as, for instance, the station workers' quarters. The proposal required a very close collaboration with Canosi architects, the architects of the station. And together, throughout 2 or 3 years, I think, we had a number of workshops where the artists, the architects, and the curatorial team developed a handbook of ideas and design principles and materials to sort of subtly but overarchingly affect the design of the station. And the result, as you will see here, maybe let me just clarify, Tongue and Groove refers to this technique where, for instance, 2 pieces of wood can be fitted with each other without using glue or screws or any other sort of intermediate material. They just fit through these very accurate cuttings into each other and become a very, very stable entity. So what we did, as I was saying, was develop this series of interventions in the station that resulted in, for instance, the fact that the materials, the choice of stone, of wood, and of different furnishings were all affected by the artistic vision. The handrails of the station, for instance, are all made in wooden tongue and grooved pieces, where usually in public spaces in Sweden, in this kind of rougher environments, what one usually sees is metal, more, let's say, resistant, rough materials. But for Jan, it was really important to introduce a warm element, one can say, something that was oriented to the public, to the users of the station, and not, something that put the focus on the human presences that will inhabit and transition through those spaces. Another of the sort of palpable results of the collaboration was the furniture of the station, which was developed as well in dialogue with the architects through this modular system. It's a series of benches and stools, also made in wood. I can say for overall context that the same thing applies as with the handrails. Instead of choosing a metal, maybe more resistant to the weather and so on, kind of furniture, Jan was very keen on having this warmth of the materials integrated in the station. And you can see here a rendering of how it will look like. As I said, the station is not finished, so next year we will be able to see the final result. But the human dimension, one can say, was very central to the artist's approach in how to develop, the different interventions in this gigantic infrastructural space. Another aspect, while we were developing the work and when the architects and the constructors started excavating the city to build the foundations of the new stations, of course the architectural remains came up. And here you can see the traces of the original wall that was sort of the perimeter of the city of Gothenburg 4 centuries ago when it was founded. And it became apparent that highlighting this historical and cultural heritage was pretty important, both for the city, for the architects, and for the different public organizations involved. So what we did in response to that was that the artist and his team picked a number of stones from that original wall, and they will be displayed in the station, in the landscape, in a sort of display that we eventually came to call the display landscape. And that marks also sort of the station is built on top of the location where that original wall was located. So by a series of other interventions, which I don't have pictures for, there will be markings on the floor also, on the stones where the location of that wall was formerly. And in a way, it fits in very well with Jan Vos, with the artist's way of pointing to sort of historical, cultural, very loaded reference, but in a subtle manner, without sort of making apparent which version of the narrative he chooses. And in that way, he offers also for the space for a variety of approaches, of ways to approach the heritage of the city. And let me talk as well of one of the sort of another very interesting aspect of the proposal that will actually not be visible for the public. And this is a very, very early draft of the workers' quarters in the station. And Jan's proposal included the fact that these inner quarters that are not publicly accessible should be furnished and treated with the same high quality materials as the public areas of the station. Quite often these inner quarters are, treated with cheaper materials because there's only a few people, one could say, using them. But for Jan, it was really important to highlight the role of the workers and their labor force. Excuse me a second. Good. And now, let's see. Let me now talk about, well, maybe I'd like to open up for if there's any comment so far or any question about this project, because before I jump to the next one.
You should never give me such an opportunity. As I will immediately jump in. I think this notion of Jan to really try to reflect also the choice of materials, the materials reflected in the architecture, as a comment to Swedish tradition, to the Swedish traditional furniture design that always encompasses to some extent, raw materials like wood, stone, different kinds of fur or different kinds of leather and you know, different kinds of flexible materials. In that conversation with him, did you have even that conversation of the notion of Swedish, you know, how Swedes perceive coziness, how they embrace a very specific understanding of public spaces that is reflected in many other Swedish public buildings? Could you just elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, of course. And indeed, it was a part of the discussions as well. And the tensions in this case came from the fact that the requirements of, let's say, solidity and resistance to weather and so on in public spaces are quite high in public environments and quite developed. So that in a way was clashing a little bit with the need for coziness that Jan was striving after. Yeah, but it was definitely a part of the discussion. It was something that influenced his choice. I'm gonna have to ask you to excuse me. I'm recently coming out of a cold and my throat is still a little bit suffering the aftermath of it. Anyway.
I know exactly what you feel like.
So it is. So I'll share the next project now, and then we can proceed to open the discussion. Let's see. Very well. So the anti-racist monument in Malmö is a project that is initiated sort of from the other side of the spectrum. It was initially the product of a civil initiative, a grassroots initiative. An article was published in the journal Sydsvenskan, as you see here on the screen, by 5 collaborators who wanted to claim the need for a public monument, a memorial, to create a room for discussing the murders, a series of racially motivated murders, white supremacist murders that had taken place in the city of Malmö between 2003 and 2010, if I remember correctly. And in this appeal, the initiators, excuse me, were emphasizing that the focus of the discussions around this series of events had been very much on the serial killer and on this theory of the lone wolf acting in a brutal way. And instead, these 5 people you see on the screen, Robert Nilsson Mohammadi, Manal Masri, Daniel Diaz, Nicolas Lunaba, and Showan Shatak, they wanted to shift the attention towards the remembrance of the victims and towards a broader discussion on the conditions in which racist, racially motivated attacks can happen. That is to say, the structural racist structures that still perpetuate themselves in society. So this, of course, had a very, very significant resonance in Malmö and beyond, in the whole of Sweden, even internationally, of course, because we know it's not an isolated case. In many, many cities in the USA, in many other countries around the world, these discussions are, in the last decade or so, have become particularly relevant. But in the case of Malmö, I mean, this discussion led actually to the fact that the city of Malmö, the municipality, decided to take on the initiative and commission their cultural unit, their cultural agency, to investigate the conditions for a monument. And that was done through a series of activities in different stages. First, there was a series of talks and debates in the public sphere with different researchers, for instance. Then there was a series of temporary interventions, which you can see here on the screen. It was overall, the exhibition in the public space was called "The Whole City is a Monument," Hela staden är ett monument. And it was commissioned to different artists: Athena Farrokhzad, Simon Ferner, Hani Kamali, Ikram Abdul Kadir, Saga Yerdet, and many others, Felicia Munirari, Saleh Hilole. And I'm not going to go into all of the interventions, but the sort of red thread connecting them was to question how narratives take space in the public sphere and whose voices are heard, and also to question a little bit, what do we expect from a monument today? How can we define a monument, and what is its role nowadays? If we are to commission a new monument, on which grounds should that discussion start? So one of the initiatives, for instance, in these temporary interventions was this work called On Our Streets, Povoragator, made by an artist, Simon Ferner, who has a project titled Archive S, where he documents the traces of racial violence in the streets of Malmö. So he installed these plaques, as you can see, in different spots around the city, like marking the date where a certain attack had taken place. But the project I want to focus more on is the third and final iteration of this discussion on the anti-racist monuments. And it's the permanent artwork titled Master Narratives by Susanna Marcus Jablonski and Santiago Mostin. And the title itself is already a good ground for discussion, also in relation to what Sergiu was mentioning earlier, and the question that you posed, Niels, also about monumentality as a form of exerting power, in a sense. So Susanna and Santiago started a process, a double-sided process that will result in a sculpture. But the first chapter of their process was the social aspect of the monument, and the artists took as a starting point the fear that was spread during the years when these racial murders were taking place, and the lack of recognition of the racist and white supremacist ideology that was behind the attacks. So they've done this campaign with a number of posters in Malmö, with 3 different posters. Memory is Resistance is one of them, written in English, in Arabic, and in Swedish, as you see in on your screen. And through a series of talks and public conversations, and through a series of posting in the public space, the artists have been gathering reflections, ideas, feelings, and reactions from the citizens of Malmö that will then all be collected and buried under the monument when it is physically erected in Malmö. And of course, this is a gesture that connects with many different cultures and many ways of dealing with wishes or even trauma or processing some experiences, and which consists on like wrapping them in a little paper and putting them on a hole underground somewhere. The Jerusalem Wall, of course, is maybe the most well-known example of this kind of act. So what the artists wanted to do first was to establish this dialogue, or to contribute to this ongoing dialogue, and then to be able to sort of, in a way, give a physical form to the idea that solidarity and community and memory are the only ways to resist and to counteract these structures. So their proposal, Master Narratives, takes on as a departing point the fact that, well, it questions the fact that one single narrative should be able to influence or affect people's understanding of reality. And instead, they transform it into a plural form. The master narrative becomes Master Narratives as a way to invite a wide variety of perspectives, because reality is not one-sided, of course, but there has been a clear imbalance in the case of racism and racial attacks, because the sort of the motives behind it did not get enough space in public discussions. So Santiago and Susana's proposal is actually a very massive onyx stone block that will be sustained by, I think it's around 200 bronze poles, as you see in the picture. And of course, it's a very direct, beautiful visual metaphor on the fact that a weight as heavy and as hard to handle as racism or traumatic events can actually be handled if we stand with each other and if we take the load collectively. So the proposal was approved, I think in 2024, if I remember correctly, and it's now under development and will be inaugurated in 2026 in the city of Malmö. And meanwhile, the discussions are ongoing. The artists are holding a number of events, and inviting different voices in the city to speak about how we can conceive monuments today. What is it a monument does? What function do we need it to have? Of course, it relates to the past often. A monument often represents or reflects a past event, but it also has an obligation to the present and to the future. How do we reread the role of monuments in that sense, from that dimension? And you can see some pictures here. I think it's a beautiful artwork. And the artists themselves wrote in their proposal, the collective strength amassed by the almost 200 rods makes it possible to carry the stone's incredible mass. The gesture is simple but powerful. A great weight is carried by many. And hopefully that is what monuments do or should do at some point, or how the issue of racism in this case should be handled in public debates. I think I will open up for questions in case anyone has a specific aspect they would like me to clarify before we jump into the sort of comparative discussion between Sergiu's presentation and the cases I have presented today.
I have translated with the print screen and of course the translation on internet, the statements also for the master narratives, but also for the Gothenburg proposal. So our colleagues can see it in the chat so that they can relate better to the concept, with the artistic concept. And further on, I will say in Romanian, if colleagues want to put questions, to address questions, I can translate them. Colegilor care doresc să adreseze întrebări le pot adresa în română și le pot traduce eu sau le pot pune în chat dacă este nevoie. Ok, just that.
Lovely. While you can think about the questions you want to raise, I have one for you, because I think there is something in these two different, examples you give. The top down, very formal, there's a very clear structure. It comes from the city, from the state. It's building a new railway station. It's altering the whole infrastructural understanding of a historical site like Gothenburg on the one hand, and then this response to a situation that is quite severe, that happens in a city, which just to you who are sitting in Romania and Moldova, Malmö was the first majority city in the Nordic countries. It was the first city where different minorities together form the majority of the inhabitants, and it's 160 different nationalities that live alongside in Malmö. So it would be fair to say that Malmö is in many ways a global village, representing it's a relatively big city with almost 400,000 inhabitants, but it represents so many different parts of the planet, and so many different cultures and so many different aspects. So it is in a way also an ongoing democratic laboratorium for the encounter of value systems, the encounter of beliefs, the encounter of power structures, and renegotiating in a way that local context constantly on an everyday basis, from work-life balance perceptions to value perceptions to engagement in public spaces, etc. But coming back to you, Alba, I think there is so many questions, but one of the things that the two of us have also been talking about before is this curatorial dimension. How do you, from a curatorial perspective, can you just elaborate on that? What are the main differences between a top-down curatorial process and a bottom-up socially engaged curatorial process?
Indeed. Thanks for the question. I think it's really it's a really good entry point to see the differences between the two commissioning processes. Because in the case of the anti-racist monument in Malmö, as I was saying, it was a grassroots initiative. The people authoring this first article that then led to the commission of the process, they come from many different backgrounds. Some of them work with kids and youth. Some of them are researchers at university, but all of them have in common this sort of activist interest in addressing these questions. So from their perspective, we had a discussion with one of the initiators of the project, with Niels, a few years ago, and he was raising the question of legitimacy, like a topic such as addressing the lack of public recognition of the racist motives behind these attacks in Malmö could not come from top down. Could not come from the state, because very often, their sort of critique or their point of departure was that very often the discussion about racism is pushed out of public context, and instead the conversations are forced to be held in private spaces by those who have actually suffered the racist aggressions, by those who are the victims. And their whole motivation was that we should shift this. It should actually be a collective discussion. And the rest of the commissioning process, the curatorial method included, should respond to that. So for what I understand, because I haven't been directly involved in this commission, the citizen dialogue and horizontal participation was a key aspect in building the whole plan. And that, of course, is a very valid curatorial strategy that even in other kind of more vertically commissioned situations, it's starting to spread, because good initiatives take root, of course. So in the case of Janvo and the Central Station, you could see it, of course, as starting the other way around. The state and two very sort of big and consistent public administrations belonging to the state commissioned this artwork. But then what is interesting about it is that Janvo, the artist, managed to shift a little bit the narrative. He refused, for instance, to create one object that would take a massive presence in the station and that would create a distance between the viewer or the user of the station and the art. He wanted instead to sort of infiltrate the spaces of the station in a more subtle way, to claim to claim collective ownership, simply put, to give the users the sense that art is an integral part of their environments, but it's not, taking space from them. It's just giving them the conditions to experience the station in a bit of a kinder way. And the same with the workers, with lifting the role of the workers when it comes to both building the foundations of Gothenburg 400 years ago, but also today. Because he was arguing, the histories and the men on the horses that you were referring to earlier, it's always the kings, the politicians, often men, often white, that are highlighted and are in the memory and in the textbooks and in all the collective narrations. But what happens with the actual people who built the city? What happens with the peasants in Gothenburg that needed to pay a tribute in form of labor? And were the ones actually putting the wooden pillars and the stones in its place. So by even in this sort of state commission process, Jan Vo tried to shift a little bit the narrative and put the focus on the fact that it's the collectivity who builds the collective history, and not the kings and queens and the top people in charge.
I think that is also a reference. There's a meta reference in that. One of the big museums in Copenhagen, the Glyptotek, has these fantastic stairways up to the upper floors, which is just one big celebration to the workers, to the handcraft, to the expertise of the persons who actually built the building, and not just the man who actually funded the building and financed it. And I think it's a very subtle thing, and it's one of the most celebrated elements in the building, actually, that people really love, because it humanizes the dimension of the collection, and it humanizes the effort that people put into it. And there is a very subtle also kind of reference barrier that is kind of broken down between art and artworks and the people visiting the institutions in that case. Thank you for that first answer. Very, very lovely. We have two questions for you. One is from Loredana. I will give the word to Loredana first, and then Natalia will be the next one.
Yeah,
Loredana?
yeah, I have seen the raise his hand. So if Natalia and or Loredana wants to address a question, they can address it in Romanian. Natalia, dacă doriți și Loredana, dacă doriți să adresați întrebări în română, le pot traduce eu, sau în engleză sau în chat. Văzusem la un moment dat că ați ridicat mâna și acum nu mai e ridicată, dar da.
Bună ziua! Eu am aplaudat, mi-a plăcut extraordinar de mult prezentarea, foarte ingenioasă pe abordarea monumentelor. Vă mulțumesc mult!
Mulțumesc, traduc acum. It was just clapping hands, so it's hooray, hooray.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Și Loredana, dacă aveți...
Am aplaudat și eu cu mare interes.
Am văzut ceva galben și am zis că să repet.
Am aplaudat. Mulțumim.
The same. It was a clapping reaction, so yeah. That was
Fantastic. We very much appreciate any applause that we can give to our two keynote speakers. I have another question for you, Alba, then, which is about, whenever we address historical aspects, you were also touching upon that when you kind of revealed the old city wall in Danville's project in Gothenburg. When there was something about the narratives, popular narratives, historical narratives, contemporary narratives, social narratives, political narratives, when they are kind of commissioned into artworks that exist in public spaces, they raise questions about legitimacy, reflectivity, representation. How do you see projects really kind of address these initiatives, not just the two examples that you gave, but in your life, in your professional life as a curator, how do you address these? Because there's so many dilemmas in that, isn't there? Can you just elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, of course. Well, it is a very relevant question, and particularly when we are talking about artworks in the public space. Not only these two cases, as you were saying, but in general, when one commissions, which is what I've been doing the last 10 years, commissioning a new artwork in the public space, it bears with it a great responsibility, as in museums are also public spaces in a way, of course, but visitors to a museum often, I want to think, go there voluntarily. There's a pre-existing interest. While art in public spaces, in this kind of infrastructure settings we work with, for instance, in stations, universities, and so on, it encounters a broad variety of public, with a broad variety of backgrounds and narratives behind them. And it needs, in a way, to be available for everyone. And that's not always easy to navigate. Throughout the last 10 years, what I've seen in Public Art Agency Sweden is that there's a constant method development ongoing, and a constant research and critical process around how the commissioning processes take place. There's, for instance, as I was saying, the temporary projects that both Malmö and in this project, but also we have worked with, they try to address these more pressing questions. There's actually one book that I would like to recommend, an anthology on titled Public Memory, Public Monuments, that Statens Konstråd, Public Art Agency Sweden, commissioned, and where the idea of what it is to make a monument today and how to address those issues of legitimacy, who is to speak when we make an intervention in public space, is addressed from several places. And I think if I'm to simplify the answer in one sentence, I would say like being self-aware and self-critical all the time, performing that criticality all the time is mandatory if one works with questions of democracy and public space. Actually, one of the artists behind the anti-racist monument, the Master of Narratives, Sergiu Musteață, he contributed with a fantastic text to this anthology, the Public Memory Anthology, and he did say at one point that one of the issues in Sweden is that public institutions often operate from a point of departure of benevolent white supremacy. And that in a way, if we are to represent the more complex configuration of societies today, or to speak and address to the different perspectives, one needs to start by observing at what an institution does, what speaking from this power position does when you go into a commissioning process, and how you can maybe not dismantle, because in the end the state is also a bearer of the collective sort of efforts of our societies, but to read critically from which position we are speaking and how to rethink how we address these questions. I think the case of the Malmö monument is really, really fantastic, because it takes as a point of departure the voices and the perspectives of those affected by the violence, but takes it beyond. It doesn't it doesn't leave, as often happens, the work of working through racism on the populations, on the groups affected by it, but it poses it as a broader societal problem that needs to be addressed by everyone. And in that sense, I think it's successful. That's probably what public art should do at its best, like bring issues that affect, like power issues that affect just a few, and make them a collective responsibility.
There's also something about the anchorage of public art. I mean, the Malmö example you just gave was very, very carefully processed. There was a lot of dialogue, there was a lot of engagement. They were including many different voices, many different perspectives. They were talking with the citizens of Malmö. They were trying to talk with different kinds of authorities. I know that one of the 5 initiators is a colleague of mine, Robert Mohammed Mustafi, which is a lecturer at the University of Malmö, also trying to bring in academic research, trying to bring in knowledge, and there's a very subtle, long-term kind of grounding of that process. And to me, as an outsider, it seems that at some point the political reality in Malmö were able to embrace that process and accept that process as a valid process for them to interact with, and then giving the mandate to really enable the artwork to become a reality. Can you just reflect a bit about that political mandate? How is that actually distributed? Because it's quite different in different contexts, isn't it?
Yes, indeed it is. And I can maybe start by saying that supposedly in Sweden there's a principle called the arm's length principle that establishes that cultural organizations, for instance, even the state run, or the ones run with public funds in general, should be able to operate independently from the political mandates when it comes to the content of the exhibitions, their programming, their discourse making, and so on. In reality, we are seeing examples where that's not the case. I think in the first roundtable, you had a discussion with Hannah, who brought up the issue that a few communes, the communes are like smaller regions throughout Sweden, that manage maybe a municipality and a few areas around. The smaller communes where politicians are in a way closer to the people working on the ground, they have started taking questionable measures such as we will commission timeless public art or classic public art, nothing controversial. What is timeless? What is classic? From which position are we talking if we embrace this supposed timelessness? So, I mean, of course, reality is complex. In Statens Konstråd, I want to think I have never experienced sort of the proximity of a politician saying you should work in this way. So that's to be celebrated. In the case of Malmö, I think there was an article I read a while ago by the two project managers, Rena Valeriana Wallstedt, I think is her name, who were saying, like, when they took on this project, their task was not to dictate actually what the content of the project should be, but to sort of provide the conditions so that the discussion could unfold in a fruitful way for as many citizens in Malmö as possible. So that should ideally be the role of public institutions when commissioning public art, not to dictate what the discussion is about, but to offer the conditions so that a variety of perspectives can cohabit and receive the space they deserve in the public discussion.
Thank you very much for that answer. I'm sitting also with a and now you have given a fantastic kind of nuanced presentation of two different cases in Sweden, and we are so lucky that Sergiu is still with us, and I'm kind of curious about what have you heard, Sergiu, and to you, Alba, what did you hear in Sergiu's presentation? What are your...
I'm still here, so yeah.
Yeah. No. So what are your kind of reflections?
Sorry, say again, Sergiu.
I'm back, so I was here. I think each society, of course, has own approach to this issue, and especially this influence, of course, the historical background, but also the quality of education in the society, the quality of the politicians which are taking decisions to different issues about using and not abusing the public space. That's why it depends what they are saying, because in many cases in Moldova, situations or issues could be solved much easily if the politicians will not speculate or provoke communities for one or another approach and not insist about. For example, so you could see like a confronting memories and confronting political approach to special cases in our society, still considering that they are important for us because we were part of this great and powerful.
We're losing you.
Power, and another part of society is trying to demonstrate, look, we would like to become full members of European Union, which is more and better conditions for the life. It's another way of thinking when we are dealing with the sensitive past. And that's why it's at the moment they're going on the parallel way. So Sweden or other Nordic countries, I think it's a little bit different. But they have another provocations, like in the United States a few years ago concerning the monument, which also were provoked by the politicians. So now more or less the situation became calm. But anyway, it demonstrates how sensitive it is, the issue of the public monuments or treating the past in relation with some political interest and using people. That's why I think we have to be very careful when we are studying and trying to lobby and to promote the balanced approach of the past. and to encourage people to be to pay attention, to make the difference, and to have a critical approach. Now it's very difficult because people less and less reading serious and academic papers. Most of them are following the TikTok, and everyone is smart because I have heard or have seen on TikTok, which is of course very dangerous. That's why I think it's very important to use different cases and to try to demonstrate that the risks, and not just let's say discussing about the history of the monument, history of the public space, what it is representing, but also to try to anticipate attitude of people or reaction of people from a sustainable way of development, of using and not abusing the public space and abusing the monument or some figures from the past.
Thank you very much, Sergiu. Alba, that sensibility about what happens in public spaces. I mean, we have seen some examples in Sweden and the Nordics over the last 5-10 years with a greater political polarization taking place, with the emergence of new far right and far left movements that are really in a way in a confrontive situation. I'm thinking about the sculpture, I think it's in Växjö in southern Sweden, where it's called The Lady with the Handbag, or it probably even has another name, but it's known in the public as The Lady with the Handbag, an old lady that was enormously provoked by a neo-Nazi march taking place. And then she responded, and there was a very quick photographer that carried a moment where she was swinging the handbag, and that old lady swinging the handbag towards a totalitarian movement became a symbol of both on history and on rejection and on civil courage. But it's also widely discussed, should that even have a place, because she's also enforcing violence herself. And it has so many different layers, and it created a very sensible political discourse and a very sensible kind of political debate in the public sphere, in media, on social media, etc. So can you give us some more examples of that sensibility, how it's being expressed in Sweden?
Yes, of course. You know, actually, to be fair, it's not Sweden. Maybe it shouldn't be like that. But the first example that came to my mind is an example of an unrealized artwork proposal in Norway. And it is also a memorial. I'm sure you know about it. Jonas Dahlberg's proposal to the Utøya Memorial. Maybe I'm deviating a little bit from your question, but I think we'll find a way back into it. To give a brief introduction, and maybe we can also find the link so that our audience can discuss it. Jonas Dahlberg is a Swedish artist who won a competition in Norway to make a memorial and remember the victims of a terrorist attack also that took place a number of years ago. I can't remember, excuse me, the exact year now. But Jonas' proposal was actually, from an artistic point of view, it was a beautiful intervention, I think, very powerful, consisting of making a cut at the very end of a peninsula near the island where some of the attacks took place. And the cut, it's very hard to explain without showing some images. So I hope we can Google our way into it somehow. But it was a quite brutal intervention in the landscape that, in a way, you know, it made it impossible to ignore the fact that the consequences of those attacks, or the structures that actually enabled those attacks to take place, are still very much in place and are something that needs a constant rediscussion in our social development, one could say. After a while, when the proposal had been approved, this brings me back to your previous question as well. There started to be many protests, especially from different far-right associations, and also some people living in the area who didn't want that constant, massive, monumental reminder of the terror attacks that had taken place. And in the end, the politicians decided to cancel the monument and just go for something much more low-key and much more classical and timeless, one could say, if I quote the previous discussion. So the interesting thing is that in that case, the arm's length principle did not apply. In the end, politicians got involved and sort of imposed a decision, although the commissioning process had been perfectly open and transparent and democratic. But the funny thing, or the interesting aspect, is that maybe because of its cancellation, that memorial has had a lot more of international attention than it probably would have if it had been just built. So the images are circulating, the debate is ongoing. The artist himself, Jonas Dahlberg, started a workshop, a lab situation thing that still works today in Stockholm to discuss issues on public space and who has access to it and who has the right to convey certain narratives or not, and how do we handle all this discussion. So yeah, I mean, things have many lives, and it's hard sometimes to see how it would develop. This lady with the handbag that you were mentioning, I think it's a fantastic monument. Of course, in a way, the lady itself with the handbag is a bit, if you don't know about the context, you don't necessarily understand that she's hitting Nazi sympathizers. So it's, you know, these kind of interventions that looks quite classic and maybe a bit weird, like what is this lady doing with the bag in the air? But that then leads to sort of start pulling a thread and unveiling the histories that are hidden, latent in public spaces. That's one of the best functions of public art, I think, when they invite viewers to start asking questions and wonder and discuss, what is this, what happened, what's behind it. So hopefully we'll see more of that.
Yeah. Amazing. You know, this, I personally would love to sit down over a good dinner and just dig even deeper into all the complex relationships between what actually happens when people become audience by accident, meeting art in public spaces, meeting art in nature, like in Udoya, and reflecting on it, and start reflecting on why is this here? What does that really do to me? Because quite often we take in, and it becomes part of a point of reference. I'm lucky enough to work in a building, and just next to where my work is, there is a huge mural. In Copenhagen, there are more than 100 murals, but at least the last 5 of them, or not 5, 50 of them, they have been commissioned in dialogue. That's been introduced a new principle about arm's length, but also about dialogue. And the dialogue is then with the people in the building where it's being painted, but also in the neighborhood. And they foster a lot of critique, a lot of discussion and debate. Is it beautiful? Is it not beautiful? Is it okay if it's not beautiful? But actually creates a framework for debate or a framework for reflection, because this is a space with a very specific history. In the plaza close by, there's a very brutalist sculpture which is on the square where there was fired 118 shots towards left-wing demonstrants prior to the Maastricht Treaty agreement in the EU, in the very early EU processes of the 1990s. You know, so every single thing has a specific logic, and nowadays most people don't even know that that's the raison d'etre behind the artwork. It's there. It's a playground for kids. They climb the monument. There are lots of cafes around it. This change of perception could be a whole theme for us to dive into. However, we are running out of time. We are getting very close to the final of our 2-hour session here. So I would just give both Sergiu and Alba an opportunity just to, if you have any last message you would like to send out to the experts in our audience today that you would like us all to reflect on, I would give you, a few final comments. So Sergiu, you're first out. Would you like to wrap up or give us a final statement that you would like us to think about?
It's a great occasion to share our views, my opinion in this case, about situation in Moldova, about the main, let's say, problems on issue concerning the public spaces and monuments, and how society react to different situations or ideas to change something, or to try to commemorate. That's why I think it's good to do a comparative analysis of societies which are in front of us, which are already somewhere, not so far, but anyway, far from situations related to political changes from one political regime to another one, and how society is reacting, and what kind of state policies are approved by the government, by the parliament. I think Swedish case, it's very interesting. In 2017, you know much better than me, but at that time I was working in Gotland, at the campus of Uppsala University, and I discussed with a lot of politicians at the parliament, at the government, at the heritage board, the role of the new policy concerning the heritage, and also the new, actually the first museum law in Sweden, and how the politicians created the more independency to the museum workers who are responsible how to treat, how to interpret, how to present the artifacts. I think this is a really good approach, another level to try to increase the trust in the professional hands, and that they are responsible for presenting in the best way the issues concerning our heritage, including the public spaces, including museum and open air museum in our society, of course, for the locals, but in relation to the visitors who are coming from abroad, and you are representing your heritage in which way and which kind of rich part of the heritage you are trying to light in different exhibitions or activities around such monuments and public spaces. So that's why communication, dialogue is the best way to find better solutions for each cases. That's why we have to give an example to the politicians. Look, guys, you have to hear us. You have to take us seriously and to try to consult if you really want to do some good and great job with peaceful impact on your and our societies.
Trust in the professionals, trust in the structure, trust in the institutions. That's very much what you're doing, isn't it, Alba? Now you are executing trust from the politicians.
Exactly. We're trying, at least.
Right. Any last reflections you would like to send with us?
I would like to thank Sergiu and Oana, of course, for arranging this roundtable. It has been really, really valuable also for me to take part of the discussion and to hear more about your experiences. And you know, sometimes I even think Sweden is very peaceful in a way. There's a politics, a social understanding of how to handle conflict in a kind of calmer way. I can sometimes think it's a bit fun and like more energizing to be in more complex contexts, such as the Moldovan heritage situation. So best of lucks with that, and I hope we'll stay in touch for future discussions.
Thank you very
much. I'm
much.
not sure if you observe, but you see black and orange is today a trend. So me and Alba as speakers, we didn't agree, but you see, we're feeling how to treat, including the colors. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Alba. A warm gratitude to you. Thank you very much, Sergiu. Fantastic to have both of you with us. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for organizing these roundtables, and thank you to every one of you for being here, listening, enjoying, reflecting with us. Thank you. I hope to see all of you to the next roundtable that will be announced soon. Thank you very much. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.